I'd like to thank Reverend Derek Anderson and Centennial for opening the doors of his church and receiving them this past week. And I'd like to thank the great Brian Jones of Samaritan Gospel Church, an outstanding musician who's continuing on in his father's footsteps, making a place on the south side of Chicago for our guests from Sweden today. We thank you, Reverend Brian Jones. I would like to reiterate everything my father just said regarding an appeal for our convention. Our convention is June 28th through July 2nd here in Chicago. It's important that we convene all of our allies, colleagues, friends, and supporters, convening at the convention time. Why is that necessary? Because our children are graduating from school. They've gone through the math and science programs. They're orators, they're writers, they're readers. They can do many things, but now they're coming up against this odorless, colorless, invisible wall of racism, this invisible wall of sexism, this wall that is stopping their natural progression. And I see young African-American teen suicide on the rise. Where is this coming from? Our children are now not knowing the things of their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. They're not having the grit. They don't understand the gospel. So we ask that you continue to pray for these young people, and we let people know that the gospel is real. We thank this Swedish choir again. What are they doing here on the south side of Chicago? What are they doing in the heart of the African American community? Well, we share the same God, and He is not limited to race. And my message today is, as I ask you to support our convention, register. If you have a child in college, if you have a child that's a teenager that is unemployed, you need to be a part of the convention. I am so tired of people telling me what my father, Reverend Jesse Jackson, hasn't done, what Reverend Jesse Jackson ought to do, what African American leadership should be doing, what the church ought to be doing. Why doesn't all leaders get together? And I ask them, why haven't you done something? Now that I've heard your soliloquy on all that we should be doing, could be doing, ought to be doing, why don't you do something other than complain? My message today is seeing the whole picture and why we need to organize for a convention. Why we need to see the whole picture and organize for this convention. We have a leader in the highest office of our land that is impetulant. We see the Prime Minister of Germany speaking at the Harvard graduation, saying that she is concerned that America is no longer a reliable ally. We see trade sanctions going up in China off previous agreed terms and conditions of engagement. We see our largest trading partner to the south in Mexico being hit with tariffs on immigration issues that they cannot fully control. We have a young and petulant leader in the White House that finds it necessary in order to call people names. He is setting the tone. He is setting the tone on high. He's setting the tone for our children's behavior. How can you kick someone out of the military that is attacking a woman when the president says you can grab them? How can you charge our children with assault when the person that's the highest person in the land says you can grab a woman? I want you to see the whole picture. So now when the state of Louisiana puts their hands on women's reproductive rights, it started with the president. When you have 9 states that are now attacking the sovereignty, the legitimacy of a woman's body, it started with the president. Be clear. I need you to see the whole picture. When this man first started running, the rich young ruler, when you saw him put out a full-page ad and say that 5 teenage African-American boys had attacked a white woman in Central Park, and people can turn a blind eye and look past that behavior. And then after those young teenagers became men and were exonerated, they never were guilty. They never should have been exonerated. They weren't wrongfully convicted. They were kidnapped. I want you to see the whole picture. When you can turn a blind eye to a man that can do that, then when he comes back for your reproductive rights, I need you to see the whole picture. Their lives is just as important as the rights that a woman has to her body. When you see the state legislator in Louisiana start this, where they say that after a heartbeat is detected, within the first 6 weeks of a pregnancy, these men get together in order to pass a law that says not even in the case of rape and incest can you do away or abort that fetus. Well, men do not have to live with the consequence of a rape. Men have not had to carry the burden of incest. Carrying that child to term, to see that child every day after you know the perpetrator impregnated you. I need you to see the whole picture. As we celebrate this convention, this is the 400th year of Africans in the America. Somebody's going to change channels now and go to sleep. You said 400 years. Stay up with me. Now, the less I hear from you, the longer I talk. The more I hear from you, the less I talk. It's been 400 years. That ties in to this very day. Sweden abolished slavery in 1813. The United States had the Emancipation Proclamation written in 1863. Sweden was getting out and away from slavery 50 years before the United States of America. That's why I'm happy to see our guest today from Sweden. I'm on the side of the abolitionists in history. Don't stop there. When you look at what's happened with the slave ship Clotilda. Clotilda, the last known slave ship to land in the United States of America. We officially said we abolished slavery in 1808 with the importation of Africans that had been enslaved. But we know that in 1860, a slave ship between the fall of 1859 and that of 1860, newly discovered, landed in Africatown, Alabama, the same state that Martin Luther King had to launch his prophetic drive for civilian rights for all of Americans. Slave ship Clotilda, we're just now finding about. It's been 172 years since we've had the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., recording our history. This is the first time in our history that an African-American man, an African-American period, Dr. Lonnie Bunch, will head that institution. We're just now beginning to understand our history. Don't go to sleep on me. It was June 1st. In 1921, on this very day, that we understood about the Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots. That was the most prosperous African-American community in the country, if not in the world. How did it start? They said there was a young black boy that whistled or looked at a Caucasian woman. He went down to the courthouse. We knew he had been set up. The community came out to show him some support. White mob started saying there was violence. They destroyed the Tulsa, Oklahoma community in the race. On this day, in 1921, it was a conspiracy between the state and the local governments and the community. This did not even get investigated until 70 years later by the state of Oklahoma to recognize them. The whole picture is what I want you to understand. Come on up to today, when now we're talking about, with the assistance of our own treasurer, the Honorable Maria Pappas, she's coming out into the community. She does not look at holding public office as a 9-to-5 job. She is doing this as a public servant. She is coming to the community right here in the heart of the South Side. She's not from this community. She respects this community enough to come and say, your houses are being stolen. This platform, this forum that my father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, put together is open for the rainbow. All those truth and honest and just seeking people. Come and tell our people what we need to know. We need to see more legislators, more elected officials to come in here. Tell the people the truth. People's houses are being taken for $1,000. She has many more ideas on how to return people's properties. She can't do it by herself. She's telling you don't pay downtown parking. I'm bringing the services to the community. Right downstairs at 930 East 50th Street, they've returned over $70,000 from her treasury, saying it's the people's money. My parents didn't know they qualified. All you have to do is come in here, type in your address, and the treasurer can tell you right now if the county owes you some money. I want you to see the whole picture. I don't want you to be confused on race and color and creed and what's happening on the highest part of our land. Our houses are being stolen. Our children are being locked out of schools. This fight is not over yet. And for the sake of your children and your grandchildren and the legacy that you're going to leave behind, I want to ask you a question. I've seen death a lot this past week. I've read a lot of obituaries most recently. What is yours going to read like? What did you do? Went to work, came home, went on Amazon Prime, got on Facebook, commented, posted, Snapchat, went to the mall, came back. You were very comfortable. And you wonder why the seats at your funeral are going to be empty. I asked a friend of mine, Reverend A.R. Leak, who did a marvelous job with the Nehemiah Project. Give him a loving round of applause. I want to highlight the good that we see in our community. Here's an undertaker that housed my mother and father when they were students that came to work for Reverend Martin Luther King. The undertaker, Spencer Leak Sr., who was driving Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. around when it wasn't popular or fashionable. The undertaker, A.R. Leak Funeral Homes and Sons, he went and did a gospel concert saying he wants to see the violence go down. He's tired of burying teenage children. And he does it for free. He helps so many. The undertaker, Reverend Spencer Leak Jr., doesn't want your money. He wants to see your child alive. I love Reverend Leak. In conclusion, on seeing the whole picture, my brothers and sisters, we are marching towards our destiny. It's been 400 years of Africans in the Americas. It's been 100 years since the 1919 race riots right here in Chicago, where we couldn't go north of the 31st Street beach, where there was a rope in the middle of the beach where blacks could go and whites could go. And when a black floated above the beach, people started throwing rocks at stones and killed him. We've seen this before. We've just now found out about the slave ship Clotilda. We've seen our Swedish brothers and sisters come over to America to make a stand for justice and make a stand for righteousness. I'm asking us, get involved with this convention. We've got very little time. The course that the current administration is on, it's going to be years in the unwinding and the undoing and the unmaking of the damage that's been done. When the president, the prime minister of Germany says, you all are going in the wrong direction. When the president of Mexico says, you all are going in the wrong direction. In a world of 7.7 billion people, when the United States has 330 million people, when we're no longer the economic sun that's driving all of the GDP, 70% in the world, we are an economic planet. And while we're sitting over here arguing and locking children out of school and clamping down and going against women and their birthrights and their natural human rights, they now are going fast forward in China. They're spending $126 billion on high-speed rail. We're spending $8 billion on high-speed rail. They've put 142 kilometers of infrastructure of mass transit into New Delhi, and we can't even get the South Side connected to the downtown right here in the city of Chicago. We need to have a convention where our children, our mothers, our fathers, our brothers come out. This life is not over. You're going to be held accountable. And I'm going to ask you, and what will your obituary say? What did you do?